The telegram hit Donald Bailey's desk like a death sentence. November 20th, 1940, Christchurch. The words were simple, the implications catastrophic. Churchill tanks now weigh 40 tons. British bridges max out at 19. Every river in Europe had just become a wall. The math wasn't complicated. It was brutal. For 2 decades, the English bridge had carried the Empire's armor across every waterway on Earth. Steel tubes, crane specialists, proven, reliable, and now completely worthless. The new Churchill tanks weren't just heavier. They were double the weight limit. German panzers were crossing rivers faster than Allied engineers could even arrive at the banks. In London, military brass convened in rooms thick with cigar smoke and thicker with desperation. The solutions presented were all disasters waiting to happen. Build lighter tanks and you hand the Germans thicker armor. Build heavier bridges and you watch the war end before you finish the first crossing. Accept that rivers would stop the British advance, and you might as well hand Hitler the keys to London yourself. But Bailey remembered something. 4 years back, waiting for a meeting that would dismiss him anyway, he'd sketched an idea on the back of an envelope. A bridge built like a child's construction toy. Steel panels, bolts, no cranes, no specialists, just soldiers and common sense. His superiors had looked at it the way you look at a man who's lost his mind. They filed it somewhere between ignored and forgotten. December 14th, 1940. The War Office Emergency Bridging Conference. Every man in that room had already written off the problem as unsolvable. They expected another round of the same failed thinking. Heavy this, complex that, impossible the other. Bailey stood up. He was holding that old envelope, the one with the sketch they'd all dismissed. He said 6 words that would crack the war wide open. What if we build bridges like toys? The room didn't just object. It exploded. Too flimsy, too dangerous. You can't hand bridge construction to common infantry. This isn't a game. Then, Lieutenant General Martel, the only man in the room still thinking instead of panicking, asked the question that mattered. How much weight can it carry? Bailey's answer would either save the Allied offensive or bury it at the bottom of every river between the Channel and Berlin. February 3rd, 1941. Bailey walked into a steel workshop in Darlington, Yorkshire, carrying blueprints that had existed only inside his head 6 months prior. The smell hit him first. Hot metal, welding flux, the kind of air that sticks to your lungs. On the workshop floor lay the first prototype panel, 10 feet long, 5 feet high, 600 pounds of welded steel that would either prove he was a genius or confirm what his colleagues had been saying for years, that he was a dreamer building toys while a war raged. The mathematics were almost insulting in their simplicity. Each panel was a truss design, weight distributed like a spider's web, 3 crossbeams, 8 interior reinforcements, creating perfect load-bearing diamonds. The framework could theoretically support massive loads while staying light enough for 6 men to carry without machinery. Theoretically, James Henderson ran his hand along the welded joints. He'd built bridges for 3 decades. He knew steel the way a priest knows scripture. Mr. Bailey, this panel weighs 1/3 of what conventional bridging requires, but you're claiming it'll carry twice the load. The physics don't add up. Henderson wasn't being difficult. He was voicing what every engineer in Britain was thinking, that Bailey had lost touch with reality. Bailey pulled out his calculations, pages of penciled equations that showed how load transferred through geometric structure. The secret isn't the weight of the steel. It's how the load moves through the framework. Each connection shares the burden with 8 others. When a 40-ton tank rolls across, the weight doesn't concentrate, it disperses. The entire structure absorbs what would break a single point. The production challenges were staggering. Each panel needed precision measured in millimeters. If panels didn't fit perfectly, field assembly under combat conditions would become a death trap. But Henderson's team had solved similar problems building railway bridges across the Yorkshire Dales. The welding was familiar. The steel was standard, only the application was revolutionary. By March 15th, the first complete bridge section sat ready. Bailey stood before that 20-foot span, knowing everything hinged on what happened next. If it failed, The War Office would cancel the project and return to solutions that couldn't carry modern armor. If it succeeded, mass production could begin within months. Either way, the next few hours would decide whether his career ended in vindication or humiliation. Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Traynor arrived from the War Office with a stopwatch and measuring tape. Two assistants carried cameras to document either triumph or disaster. Traynor represented military caution wrapped in optimism. "Mr. Bailey, we've allocated considerable resources based on your theories. Today we discover if theories survives contact with reality." The test weight approached slowly. A Bedford truck loaded with concrete blocks. 25 tons, 5 tons over existing bridge capacity. Bailey held his breath as the front wheels touched the bridge deck. The steel absorbed the load without visible deflection. The truck rolled to center span. Still nothing. Complete crossing in 37 seconds. Traynor nodded but wasn't finished. Field conditions require safety margins. Can it handle overloading? The truck returned carrying 35 tons. Successful crossing. Then 40 tons. The bridge held firm. Bailey's confidence grew with each test, but Traynor demanded ultimate proof. May 5th, 1941. They needed 40 tons of military equipment. The solution arrived as a Great War Mark V tank weighing 28 tons, modified with a platform carrying 2 smaller Whippet tanks. Total weight approached 41 tons. The exact Churchill specification. Bailey watched from 50 yards as that massive load approached his bridge. Everything he'd calculated, designed, argued for, came down to this moment. The Mark V steel tracks contacted the bridge with a grinding metallic sound that echoed across the test field. The framework visibly absorbed the load, steel beams flexing slightly but holding structural integrity. The tank reached center span. Maximum stress point. Bailey's calculations said this was the moment of truth. The truss distributed 41 tons exactly as the math predicted. No catastrophic failure. No dangerous deflection. The bridge performed flawlessly. Lieutenant General Sir Gifford Martel arrived for the final demonstration. He'd watched superior tank designs outpace the infrastructure meant to support them. His endorsement would transform Bailey's rejected sketch into military doctrine. The engineers weren't satisfied meeting specifications. They loaded pig iron onto the Mark V. 45 tons. The bridge held. 50 tons, still secure. Finally, at 60 tons, 50% over design specs, the bridge showed stress but refused to fail catastrophically. Martel's assessment was immediate. This bridge doubles the value of Allied armor. Mr. Bailey, you've solved the fundamental problem limiting tank mobility. The endorsement Bailey had sought for 5 years arrived in a single sentence that would reshape Allied strategy. July 22nd, 1941. The War Office approved mass production. Initial order 25,000 panels. The challenge seemed impossible. British firms were maxed out on existing war contracts. Traditional bridge manufacturers couldn't meet volume within acceptable timeframes. Bailey's solution proved as innovative as his original design. Since panels were small components rather than massive sections, production could distribute among hundreds of smaller firms. Window manufacturers, bedstead makers, greenhouse builders, even Littlewood's department stores received component contracts. The modular design that enabled field assembly also enabled distributed manufacturing impossible with conventional bridges. By November 1941, production reached 25,000 panels monthly. Each bridge required roughly 100 panels. The math was encouraging: 250 complete bridges per month, enough to support major operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. Bailey's impossible idea had become Britain's secret weapon. November 26, 1942. The Medjez River near Medjez El Bab, Tunisia. At 0200 hours, 40 sappers from the 237th Field Company crept through darkness toward a blown bridge that had become a graveyard. For 3 weeks, every crossing attempt had ended in casualties and failure. German machine guns commanded the high ground. Mortar crews had ranged every approach. The mathematics were simple. Cross the river, or watch the entire North African campaign stall indefinitely. Captain Michael Harrison studied the wreckage through binoculars. German engineers had done thorough work, shaped charges at precise intervals, creating maximum debris. Conventional equipment couldn't approach without exposing crews to devastating crossfire, but Harrison carried something the Germans hadn't anticipated: Bailey panels small enough to assemble under direct fire. The first panels moved forward at 02:15. Teams of 6 men each, 600 pounds of steel per panel, manageable by infantry, but substantial enough to support Churchill weight. Private James Mackenzie, a Glasgow shipyard worker before the war, directed positioning with hand signals. No commands, no mechanical noise, just methodical assembly under starlight, while German sentries patrolled 800 meters away. The bridge grew incrementally. 10-foot sections bolted with precision that would have impressed Bailey himself. Each connection required exact alignment. Millimeter tolerances meant the difference between structural integrity and catastrophic failure. Mackenzie's team worked with practiced efficiency. They'd rehearsed assembly countless times in English training camps, but training never included incoming artillery. At 04:30, German mortars began ranging the site. First salvo landed 50 meters short, shrapnel whistling through darkness. Harrison's men dove for cover, then resumed without orders. The bridge was 60 feet long, halfway across the 90-foot span. Abandoning construction meant accepting defeat and watching German reinforcements arrive, unopposed. The second salvo landed directly among work crews. Private Thomas Fletcher, 19 years old, took shrapnel through his shoulder but kept positioning panels with his good arm. Lance Corporal David Smith bled from fragment wounds but refused evacuation until his section was complete. The bridge demanded precision under conditions that made precision nearly impossible. By 0600, the span reached 80 feet, only 10 remaining. Dawn approached rapidly, which meant German observers would gain clear sight lines. But it also meant British tanks could cross under their own artillery support. The final section proved most challenging. Cantilevers extending over open water required perfect balance. Mackenzie later recalled the moment Germans' small arms fire began raking the site. "Jerry figured out what we were doing. Bullets sparking off steel panels. But we were so close. Lost 2 good men in those final minutes, Henderson and Williams. But the bridge held together." At 08:15, the first Churchill approached Harrison's completed span. 40 tons of steel armor representing everything Bailey's math had promised. The tank commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, understood his crossing would either validate or destroy confidence in Bailey bridging throughout the British Army. If it failed, tank crews would refuse to trust similar spans across North Africa and Italy. Morrison's Churchill reached bridge center at 08:23. Maximum stress, maximum load distribution. The steel panels absorbed the tank's weight exactly as designed, load transferring through geometric patterns, dispersing force across the entire structure. No deflection, no failure. The bridge performed flawlessly under baptism of fire. By 0900, 12 Churchills had crossed, followed by motorized infantry and supply vehicles. The road to Tunis lay open for the first time in 3 weeks. German resistance, built on the assumption that Medjez crossing was impossible, collapsed within hours. Bailey's impossible idea had just opened the path to Allied victory in North Africa. Success at Medjez established Bailey bridging as standard for rapid crossing under combat. By February 1943, Royal Engineer companies across Tunisia carried panels as standard equipment. German retreats followed predictable patterns. Blow every bridge, mine every approach, assume Allied advances stall at water obstacles. Allied responses became equally predictable. Bailey bridges assembled faster than German demolitions could destroy crossings. The Sangro River crossing in December 1943 demonstrated ultimate capabilities. German engineers had destroyed 19 spans, leaving 14 stone piers scattered across 1,100 feet of rushing water. Conventional wisdom declared the position impassable. British engineers saw opportunity. Working 72 hours straight, 1st Canadian Corps engineers spanned the entire Sangro using German left piers as anchors. The completed bridge stretched 1,126 feet, longest Bailey span yet constructed. Carrying 40-ton tanks across a gap, Germans considered absolutely impassable. Prisoner interrogations revealed growing German frustration. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed thorough demolitions would delay advances for days or weeks. Instead, Bailey bridges appeared within hours of withdrawals. Colonel Heinrich Weber, captured near Anzio, summarized German bewilderment. "Every bridge we destroy, they replace immediately. It's become impossible to slow their advance using conventional obstacles." By May 1944, Allied forces had constructed over 3,000 Bailey bridges across Sicily and Italy alone. Total length exceeded 55 miles, a steel highway connecting every major advance from Tunisia to Rome. Each span represented Bailey's vision made manifest. Standardized panels assembled by ordinary soldiers carrying modern tanks across obstacles that would have stopped armies for generations. The impossible had become routine. Routine had become victory. June 4th, 1944. Portsmouth Harbor, the largest invasion fleet in human history, prepared for overlord. 10,000 Bailey panels sat in waterproof containers aboard landing ships. Each panel bore stamped quality control numbers, ensuring precise fit under combat. Lesson learned from Italy, where imperfect tolerances had cost lives. Invasion logistics demanded every river, canal, and blown bridge in Normandy be crossable within hours, not days. Major General Percy Hobart supervised loading specialized equipment aboard LST-325, knowing Normandy's success depended as much on rapid infrastructure repair as infantry courage. German strategy relied heavily on choke point control, blown bridges forcing Allied armor into predictable killing zones. Bailey bridges represented the antidote, enabling forces to maintain momentum regardless of demolition damage. Pre-invasion intelligence painted a sobering picture. Germans had prepared demolition charges on every significant bridge from Norman coast to Paris. Explosive placements followed Wehrmacht doctrine precisely, shaped charges positioned for maximum structural damage and debris obstacles. Allied planners calculated conventional methods would require 3 to 5 days per major crossing, giving German reinforcements time to establish defensive positions. June 7, 1944, 0600. The first Bailey Bridge in occupied Europe began assembly across Caen Canal near Château de Bénouville. Location was strategically critical. John Howard's glider troops had seized Pegasus Bridge intact during early D-Day hours, but original span could support only light vehicles. Churchill's required heavier capacity. Only Bailey bridging could provide. Lieutenant Colonel James Hill of 6th Airborne directed assembly, while German snipers maintained harassing fire from Bénouville's church tower. Each panel positioning required calculated risk. Expose crews to fire or delay armor support paratroopers desperately needed. Hill's decision was immediate. Accept casualties to maintain tempo. The crew worked under conditions making Tunisia seem peaceful. German artillery had ranged every approach. Sniper fire forced constant interruptions as crews dove behind steel panels. Mortar shells bracketed the site every 20 minutes with methodical precision, suggesting forward observers were directing from concealed positions. Private William Davies, a Welsh miner before conscription, took a sniper bullet through his thigh at 09:15, but refused evacuation until his section was secure. "Jerry can't stop us building," Davies told the medic. "Bridge goes up no matter what." His determination reflected broader attitude among Royal Engineer units. Bailey bridges had become symbols of Allied technological superiority that ordinary soldiers understood and trusted. By 1400, the span reached completion, despite 3 engineers killed and 7 wounded. The bridge received immediate designation London 1, first of hundreds that would carry Allied armor from Normandy beaches to German surrender. Churchill's began crossing at 1430. 40-ton weight distributed across Bailey's framework exactly as math predicted. German reaction was swift and revealing. Wehrmacht. Intelligence reports captured after the war showed complete bewilderment at Allied bridging speed. Oberst Friedrich Weber of 7th Army Engineering wrote headquarters. Enemy bridge construction proceeds at impossible pace. Demolitions that should delay advance for days are overcome in hours. Recommend immediate investigation of Allied bridging technology. August 15, 1944, brought unexpected crisis, nearly derailing the entire program. The 31st U.S. Engineering Regiment discovered American-manufactured Bailey panels wouldn't fit British specifications. Tolerance differences measured in millimeters, insignificant in peacetime. Catastrophic under combat, where perfect alignment meant survival. Colonel Robert Morrison, commanding U.S. Army engineers in Normandy, faced 850 bridge kits already shipped to France that were essentially unusable except as standalone installations. The discovery highlighted fundamental principle Bailey had insisted upon from beginning. Standardization required absolute precision, not approximate compatibility. Solution required immediate action across 2 continents. Every American kit received identification tags marking them independent use only, while emergency shipments of British-manufactured panels rushed across Atlantic. Crisis revealed Bailey's distributed system spread among 650 small. British firms achieved superior quality control compared to American mass production methods. March 25, 1945. Wesel, Germany. The Rhine represented final test of Bailey capabilities. 1,814 feet of rushing water, German propaganda claimed would stop Allied advances permanently. 2nd Canadian Corps engineers accepted the challenge with characteristic understatement. Calculating the crossing would require 227 truckloads of components and 9,500 man-hours of assembly. Major David Campbell directed 300 engineers working continuous shifts around the clock. Rhine crossing demanded everything Bailey's original design had promised. Standardized panels assembled by hand, no cranes required. Modular construction enabling rapid deployment under combat. Each shift change brought fresh crews replacing exhausted workers. Maintaining construction tempo, German observers found impossible to believe. The completed bridge earned designation Blackfriars in honor of London's Thames crossing. Total assembly time measured 48 hours from first panel to final vehicle crossing. Testament to Bailey's vision of engineering elegance through simplicity. March 28th, first Churchills rolled across the Rhine on a bridge existing only because a quiet civil engineer refused to accept complex problems required complex solutions. German prisoners expressed professional admiration mixed with tactical despair. Hauptmann Klaus Müller of Rhine Defense Engineers, captured near Wesel, stated during interrogation, "Your Bailey bridges represent superior engineering philosophy. We build permanent structures requiring specialist equipment. You build temporary structures. Ordinary soldiers can assemble anywhere. In warfare, temporary and fast defeats, permanent and slow." Rhine crossing marked Bailey bridging's ultimate vindication, proving revolutionary thinking could overcome institutional resistance when supported by mathematical precision and battlefield necessity. From Tunisia to Rhine, Bailey's impossible idea had carried Allied armor across every water obstacle, transforming strategic mobility that determined victory. The quiet engineer's envelope sketch had become the steel highway to German surrender. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. Donald Coleman Bailey sat in his Christchurch office surrounded by statistical reports revealing true scope of his innovation's impact on Allied victory. 4,500 Bailey bridges constructed during the war, 700,000 individual panels manufactured across 650 British firms. Combined length exceeding 200 miles, enough steel highway to span London to Edinburgh. Every major Allied advance from Tunisia to Berlin had crossed Bailey-built spans, transforming strategic mobility in ways military planners were still struggling to comprehend. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's official assessment arrived by courier that morning. Typed on tactical headquarters, stationery still bearing mud stains from German roads. Bailey bridging made immense contribution toward ending World War II. Without large supplies of Bailey bridging, I could never have maintained speed and tempo of forward movement characterizing our victorious campaigns. The endorsement Bailey had sought for 9 years finally arrived, written by the commander who'd witnessed firsthand how engineering innovation translated into battlefield supremacy. General Dwight Eisenhower's evaluation proved even more expansive, placing Bailey bridges among 3 most important engineering achievements of the war. Alongside radar development and heavy bomber production, the comparison was revealing. Bailey's standardized panels had achieved strategic importance equivalent to technologies requiring massive industrial investments and cutting-edge scientific research. Sometimes the most revolutionary advances emerged from elegant simplicity rather than complex innovation. Human cost statistics told their own story. Royal Engineer casualties during bridge construction totaled 2,347 killed and wounded across all theaters. But Allied armor losses at river crossings dropped 73% compared to Great War rates when inadequate bridging forced tanks into predictable kill zones. Bailey's mathematics of load distribution had become mathematics of survival, saving thousands of lives by enabling rapid crossing of obstacles previously requiring prolonged exposure to enemy fire. June 15, 1946, Buckingham Palace. Bailey received his knighthood from King George VI in ceremony, recognizing not just individual achievement, but broader principle that innovation could emerge from unexpected sources. The quiet civil engineer who'd sketched bridge designs during lunch breaks became Sir Donald Bailey, Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, his elevation symbolizing how wartime had democratized recognition of technical genius. Royal Commission on Awards to Inventors granted Bailey £12,000, substantial fortune in 1946, currency reflecting government calculation of his contribution's monetary value. But Bailey's proudest recognition came in handwritten letter from Private James Mackenzie, the Glasgow sapper who'd assembled First Combat Bailey Bridge at Mages. Sir Donald, you saved more lives than any general. Every river we crossed instead of died at, that was your bridge carrying us to safety. Post-war applications revealed Bailey's vision extending far beyond military requirements. Ontario Hydroelectric purchased massive quantities of surplus bridging for civilian infrastructure across Canada's remote territories. Standardized panels that had carried Shermans across Norman rivers now supported logging trucks crossing Ontario rapids, hydroelectric equipment reaching construction sites, emergency services accessing disaster zones. From Australia's outback to Africa's developing regions, Bailey bridges became standard solution for temporary infrastructure. Mining companies discovered spans could be assembled faster and cheaper than permanent structures, then relocated when operations moved. Construction firms found Bailey bridging enabled access to previously unreachable locations. Opening possibilities for development, permanent bridges couldn't justify economically. Civilian transformation proved Bailey's original insight. Complex problems often required simple solutions rather than elaborate engineering. Military necessity had forced acceptance of revolutionary thinking, but peacetime applications demonstrated broader principle: modular construction, standardized components, hand assembly without specialized equipment. These became foundational concepts influencing everything from prefabricated housing to aerospace engineering. October 19, 1968, Ronan. Point apartment tower collapse in London sparked investigation into structural engineering practices, revealing Bailey Bridge influence on modern construction methods, modular principle, standardized components assembled without cranes or specialized equipment, had evolved into architectural concepts prioritizing speed and economy over traditional craftsmanship. Not all applications proved successful, but fundamental approach Bailey pioneered continued shaping how engineers approached complex structural challenges. Space program engineers at NASA studied Bailey assembly techniques for potential application to orbital construction. Principle of hand assembly using standardized modules appealed to mission planners. Understanding space construction would require techniques similar to battlefield engineering: limited equipment, constrained time, high reliability requirements. Bailey's wartime innovation influenced thinking about challenges that wouldn't emerge for decades. December 5th, 1985, Bailey's death at 84 marked end of era when individual innovation could transform global conflict. Obituaries emphasize statistical achievements. Bridges built, tanks carried, rivers crossed, but missed deeper significance. Bailey had proven revolutionary solutions often emerged from questioning fundamental assumptions rather than accepting conventional wisdom. Engineering principles Bailey established continued evolving long after his death. Disaster relief organizations adopted Bailey-style modular bridging for earthquake and flood response. Military forces worldwide integrated Bailey concepts into rapid deployment strategies. Construction companies discovered temporary structures assembled from standardized components often outlasted permanent installations built through traditional methods. By 21st century, Bailey principles appeared in unexpected applications. International Space Station modules followed Bailey's standardized approach. Precision-manufactured components designed for hand assembly in hostile environments. Emergency medical facilities used Bailey-inspired modular construction for rapid deployment during humanitarian crisis. Even computer network architecture incorporated concepts Bailey pioneered, standardized components working together, creating complex systems. The man whose envelope sketch was dismissed by War Office bureaucrats in 1936 had created solutions outlasting the war, outperforming every competitor, establishing engineering principles still governing modern construction. Bailey's legacy transcended bridges themselves, proving sometimes the most profound innovations emerged when quiet persistence overcame institutional resistance. His simple idea that complex structures could be built from standardized parts by ordinary people using basic tools had become orthodox thinking, shaping how humanity approached technical challenges requiring speed, reliability, and adaptability under extreme conditions. September 11th, 2001. Collapse of New York's World Trade Center towers prompted emergency engineers to deploy Bailey principle bridging across Manhattan's debris fields within hours of attack. Federal Emergency Management Agency had stockpiled modular systems based directly on Bailey's wartime innovations. Recognizing disaster response required same rapid deployment capabilities serving Allied forces 60 years earlier. Standardized panels, now manufactured from lightweight aluminum alloys rather than steel, carried rescue vehicles across unstable rubble where conventional construction would have required weeks of preparation. Speed of deployment amazed even experienced disaster teams. Emergency Coordinator Captain Michael Rodriguez of New York Fire Department later reported, "We had vehicle access across ground zero debris in 6 hours using modular bridging. Traditional methods would have taken 2 weeks minimum. Those Bailey principles saved lives by getting rescue equipment where we needed it immediately." Ghost of Donald Bailey's engineering philosophy continued serving humanity in ways the modest civil engineer could never have imagined. Hurricane Katrina's devastation in 2005 revealed Bailey bridging's evolution into sophisticated disaster response systems. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers deployed over 200 modular spans across Louisiana's flooded regions, enabling evacuation vehicles and supply convoys to reach isolated communities. Bridges assembled in sections identical to Bailey's original concept. Standardized components carried by ordinary soldiers, hand-assembled without cranes or specialized equipment, supporting loads far exceeding apparent structural capacity. Major Jennifer Walsh of Corps of Engineers supervised bridge construction across Industrial Canal, where storm surge had destroyed every fixed crossing. Her crews worked in conditions reminiscent of wartime. Hostile environment, time pressure, life or death consequences for construction speed. Bailey concept saved thousands of lives during Katrina, Walsh reported to congressional investigators. Modular bridging allowed us to restore transportation networks faster than any alternative technology. Without those bridges, entire neighborhoods would have remained cut off for months. 21st-century military applications demonstrated how Bailey's principles evolved while maintaining fundamental advantage. Rapid deployment by non-specialist personnel. Operation Iraqi Freedom utilized over 800 Bailey-style bridges across Mesopotamian rivers and urban destruction zones. Bridges supported 70-ton main battle tanks, nearly double the weight of Churchill's testing Bailey's original designs. Advanced materials and computer-aided design increased capacity while preserving hand-assembly advantage-making. Bailey Bridging Revolutionary. Captain David Chen of U.S. Army's 18th Engineer Brigade constructed longest Bailey principal span since World War II across Tigris River near Baghdad. Bridge stretched 1,400 feet, exceeding even famous Rhine crossing at Wesel. "We're using same basic concept Bailey invented," Chen explained to embedded journalists. "Standardized panels, soldier assembly, no heavy equipment required. Materials are stronger now, but philosophy remains unchanged. Make the complex simple." International development organizations discovered Bailey bridging's potential for civilian infrastructure in regions lacking heavy construction equipment. Médecins Sans Frontières deployed portable Bailey-style bridges across conflict zones in Sudan, Somalia, and Afghanistan, enabling medical supply convoys to reach previously inaccessible populations. Bridges assembled by medical volunteers rather than professional engineers, proving Bailey's original insight that complex engineering could be simplified for ordinary users. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, directing MSF operations in South Sudan, supervised bridge construction across White Nile using volunteers with no engineering background. Bailey's concept democratized bridge building, Mitchell observed. "Our medical teams can assemble spans professional engineers once required specialized training to construct. That simplicity translates directly into lives saved when we reach patients faster." Humanitarian applications fulfilled Bailey's unspoken vision, technology serving human need rather than institutional complexity. International Space Station Program incorporated Bailey principles into orbital construction procedures that would have seemed science fiction when Bailey sketched his original design. Astronauts assembled modular truss sections using hand tools in zero gravity, following procedures derived directly from Bailey bridge assembly techniques. NASA engineers had studied wartime bridging operations to understand how complex structures could be built by personnel wearing bulky, protective equipment under extreme stress. Commander Lisa Nowak during Expedition 14 construction reported to Mission Control. Truss assembly sequence follows same logical progression Bailey developed for field bridging. Standardized modules, precise connections, no heavy machinery required. Principles work as well in space as they did crossing European rivers. Engineering philosophy enabling Allied victory had evolved to support humanity's expansion beyond Earth. Corporate applications revealed Bailey's influence on modern manufacturing and construction industries. Automotive companies adopted modular assembly concepts for factory construction, enabling rapid facility deployment in emerging markets. Technology firms used Bailey-inspired modular data centers, assembled by local technicians without specialized training. Construction industry embraced prefabricated building systems following Bailey's standardization principles. Amazon's distribution network relied heavily on Bailey principle construction for rapid warehouse deployment. Company could establish fully functional distribution centers in remote locations using standardized components assembled by local labor. "We're essentially building Bailey bridges for package handling," explained Amazon Logistics Director Mark Stevens. Same concept, standardized parts, local assembly, rapid deployment, supporting strategic objectives. Educational legacy persisted through engineering curricula, using Bailey bridges as case studies in innovative problem-solving. Massachusetts Institute of Technology's civil engineering program required students to analyze Bailey's design decisions, understanding how mathematical elegance emerged from practical constraints. Bridges demonstrated revolutionary solutions often appeared simple only after someone solved underlying complexity. Professor Robert Chen at MIT's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering explained Bailey's enduring relevance to engineering students. Bailey bridges teach us Innovation isn't about adding complexity. It's about finding elegant simplicity within complex problems. Every student understanding why Bailey's solution worked becomes better engineer regardless of specialization. Climate change response efforts increasingly relied on Bailey-derived technologies for rapid infrastructure deployment. Rising sea levels and extreme weather demanded emergency bridging deployed faster than traditional construction. Modular principles Bailey established provided frameworks for addressing 21st century challenges 19th century engineering couldn't have anticipated. Quiet civil engineer who died in 1985 had created more than bridges. He'd established a philosophical approach to technical problems, continuing to shape how humanity responded to crisis. Built infrastructure, expanded into hostile environments, Bailey's legacy transcended any single application, proving sometimes most profound innovations emerged when individual creativity overcame institutional limitations to serve fundamental human needs. Long after the smoke cleared, the silence still spoke of what they built and what it cost.